Hello, my name is John Burris. Thank you for joining me today for this short video. This video is called The Language of Victim Anatomy. The word choices we use are very important. And how we choose those words determines whether we're a victim in our life or we empower ourselves. So much of our time when it comes to our own anatomy, we're choosing language that's victim-based, and it causes us to basically blame others for what happens to us. We've forgotten how to use empowering language that helps us get well and get better and to recover from things. Instead, we're lulled into believing that things just happen to us, and that becomes the language of victim anatomy. So anatomy is neutral, but how we perceive it is determined by what culture is teaching us. So most of us are taught to believe that things just happen to us in our bodies. And sometimes that's true. You might get mold poisoning and you get your system poisoned, or you might develop a bacteria or virus, and that is part of nature and the environment attacking your system. But much of what happens to us is our own creation because of our either neglect of our body, or we're taught the wrong things, or we're doing the wrong things on our own. And so we create much of our own pain, discomfort, and collapse of our body. And then we become victims by calling it something else. We basically have mastered the art of the language of victim anatomy. So in today's video, I hope to share with you how changing our perspective about our own anatomy will change our outcome. And by looking at the word choices that we use and how we perceive our body will make a large difference in how well you get. So as I previously stated, there are things that happen to us that are out of our control. An infection, a virus, mold. But much of what happens to us is our own creation. And the problem is a lot of the world is dominated by the white coat industry. It's an industrial complex, and it causes what's called scientification. Well, not everything in our body that happens to us is science-based. There are lots of things that happen to us that have nothing to do with science, yet the scientific community has taken it over, using the white coat as a shield of power to determine how we perceive our bodies. And this is where victimization of our anatomy begins. We're taught that our biology fails us, that it's not our fault, that we are just a victim of circumstances or date or aging. And the white coat industry is basically the culprit for teaching us to be a victim of our own biology. And starting there, we have to re-examine this whole perception of ourselves that not everything is based on science and not everything is based on the white coat industry. And by shifting our perception there, we can start to change our own outcome. For instance, the scientific world has taken over the concept of addictions and call them biological diseases, where something's wrong with our biology, and so we become a victim of our biology, and there's nothing we can do about it according to that model. We basically suffer because our biology is failing us. You have an errant gene or something wrong with your biology causing you to eat, drink, smoke, whatever the particular addiction is. Well, I don't believe that model. I don't believe in the scientification of addictions and many other things. In my world, addictions are the fact that we don't have the ability to process our emotions. And it's a very natural thing. If you'd like to learn more, I have a 4-part series on addictions called Natural Recovery from Addiction that teaches you the truth about addictions. They're not science-based. So a lot of the scientification of our world teaches us to be a victim of our biology, and we're stuck in that model, and you can't get out when you're stuck in that model because it teaches you that it's not your fault that your body's collapsing. So I don't agree with that, but that's our starting point today, is we're taught by the white coat industry to be a victim of our own biology. In order to unravel this mystery and empower ourselves in our anatomy, we need to start looking at the language you use and our perception. So what I've done, I've identified 16 different terms we often use, and people fall victim to that. They basically start to believe it, and then they can't change it or get out of it because it becomes ingrained in them that this is how things are. Their biology has failed them, and there's nothing to do about it. So once again, there are things that happen to us that are out of our control. But most of what happens to us is either something we created intentionally or accidentally, or by ignorance, by not knowing what proper things to be doing in our life. And so much of what's going on in our failure of our anatomy and biology and body is our own self-creation. And so when we start looking at the language of empowerment, we can start to look at how we can change our life and be a creator of our own health and wellness based on changing the language we use. The first term I like to use is called age-related. One of the greatest victim language metaphors we can ever hear about. So here we have a calendar, and this whole mythology, age-related means you keep turning the pages of your life, your calendar, and the more days and months you collect, that your body's designed to fall apart, because that's the design based on the scientific model and the victim model. Well, that's not true at all. I know many people who are advanced ages who are doing really well, and they've got lots of calendar days. I've seen many advanced yoga teachers who do really well. I'm 66 years old and I'm pain-free. I have zero pain in my body. Coming from a place when I was in my 20s, I was broken from sports and fitness and other things. I have zero pain, great flexibility. And this whole notion, age-related, is a myth. Your body doesn't break down because of age. Now, there are things that happen. Your hair gets gray, okay? That does happen. People lose their hair. There are things that happen. So I'm not saying that age and aging doesn't affect us. It does, but it doesn't have to affect you in the way of your body breaking down, because most of the things that happen to us are not age-related. So every time you hear a medical professional tell you it's age-related, it's a bunch of bunk. Because if it were age-related, then everybody of that age would have it. And that's not true at all. There's lots of people doing really well who've got a lot of years on them. So age-related is the first myth we need to dispel, because most of what happens to us is not age-related. It's what we're doing or not doing during those time periods that affect us, and not the calendar days themselves. The second victim terminology is called degenerative, like you're supposed to fail. Degenerative is classic in the victim terminology, that you're supposed to fail. You have a degenerative disc in your back. You have a degenerative neck issue. This is such a common belief in the medical community that gets passed down to the community at large. Your body's not supposed to fail. It's regenerative. We have trillions of cells every day, and they're supposed to recreate themselves and build new cells. And basically, your body's not degenerative. There's nothing in your body that degenerates on its own. It's what we're doing during that time period that affects us the most. The term degenerative basically starts from the mechanistic model that's over 400 years old. Imagine that. Most people are still practicing anatomy based on René Descartes and the Cartesian model, which is over 400 years old, which teaches us the body's a machine, and the machine has separate parts that break down. Well, how crazy is that? 400-year-old belief system still being practiced. For example, here's your disc here, and here's a healthy disc here, and it has lots of space in it. And here's one starts to erode here, and it starts having much less space and starts to pinch on a nerve. And here you start to see degeneration. And at here we actually have crepitus where they're grinding together. So the model we're being taught by the degenerative victim model is this just happens by itself because of your age and because it's supposed to wear out. That's not true at all. What really happens is this. The spinal vertebrae, which are the yellow part, are surrounded by fascia, connective tissue. And when you harden your connective tissue through either neglect or the wrong kind of exercises, or basically not taking care of your fascia, it starts to shorten and harden and glue together, and it starts to compress in the disc space here, and you lose this space and you grind on the bones. That's because of your own choice. The things you're doing or not doing are creating that. Your spine is not creating that by itself. The choices you're making in your life, your exercise choices, your injuries that never get taken care of, are causing the fascia to shorten, glue together, and compress on the spine. That's a deliberate choice you're making, and it has nothing to do with degenerative. It's a choice you're making, and your spine is suffering because of the choices you're making. So the whole notion of degenerative, it's a false narrative. It's based on a 400-year-old model that most people are still following. The anatomy that shows up in our body or tissues are based on the input or lack of input. If you're doing the wrong kinds of exercise, you wonder why your knees are all out. You're running a lot, and all of a sudden you can't understand why your knees are rolling out and your knees have pain and whatnot. You have old injuries you never took care of. Well, that's input. If you're inputting in a different direction, you're doing lots of yoga or stretching or getting regular massages or body work. You're inputting in a different direction. So how we input into our body determines what happens to our disc, our bones, our muscles, our nerves. And most people are inputting in completely the wrong way. So they're wearing down and they're being called degenerative, but it's the choices they're making or not making that are causing that. The third victim model is called wear and tear. This concept of wear and tear is another common scientification victim model, and it tells us that we're basically failing because your body parts are failing on their own. Not true at all. So for example, here's a knee joint, and the knee joint needs to line up correctly to do its thing, bending. But what happens if you have an old ankle injury years before, and it causes a twist in your knee, a rotation in your leg? So now it's not rotating correctly, and now it's grinding in the joint. That's not caused by aging or wear and tear. That's the choices you're making. You never corrected the foot injury. And so what happens is, now your knee's not lined up correctly, or we call it alignment in yoga, and you're grinding down the cartilage in your knee because of the choices you've made. That has nothing to do with randomness or some age-related issue. Wear and tear is basically a false narrative because you're blaming something that you're doing or not doing on how your knee joints or other joints are responding. So that's another lie we're told. Most people, when they have what's called wear and tear, are basically blaming their body for failing when they've chosen to do things or not do things. For example, if you run a lot and it causes a rotation of your knees, now the cartilage is wearing down, well, that's the choice you're making. So most of what we're taught is a lie because wear and tear really doesn't exist. It's the misalignment in your body that you've actually created. The fourth common victim phrase is called arthritis. Now there's two really different types of arthritis. There's osteoarthritis and rheumatoid. And in most osteoarthritis, it's because of something you've yourself created. So the Western scientific model doesn't necessarily understand arthritis because they blame it. Oh, you have an arthritic hip, or you have an arthritic knee, or you have an arthritic neck, and we just accept that as truth. But no one tells you where it's coming from and how to correct it. Let's just replace the joint and replace your knee and your hip because it's arthritic. So what's happening is this: in most cases, people are misaligned. So let's say you have an old sprained ankle from playing soccer when you're 7 years old, and it causes a destabilization of your ankle. And then your leg starts to rotate, and now your knee's not lined up correctly, it's rotated. And now you have misalignment in your knee joint because of rotation in your leg. And that rotation continues up into your hip. And now you have a hip misalignment. Oh, you have arthritis in your hip, let's replace your hip. While we're at it, let's replace your knee because you have arthritis, the deadly nail in the coffin. It's all because your leg is rotated and spiraled because of something you've done, the injury, and something you haven't done, taking care of the injury. Most people with arthritic hips and knees, ankles, and even back issues have a rotation in their leg, a spiral, usually from something that happened below the knee many, many decades before. And they say, oh, you have arthritis now in your hip. It's all because of misalignment in the hip socket, the knee socket, because of something you yourself have done. So this whole notion of arthritis, it's self-creation, and most people aren't taught how to correctly exercise or take care of themselves, so they end up replacing their hips, their knee, other joints because they have arthritis. and they blame it on aging, blame it on other things, but it's a self-creation in most cases. In almost all cases where arthritis, the fascia is involved. The fascia is the connective tissue network that keeps everything together. It's the scaffolding of the body. Yet, most medical doctors, physical therapists, sports trainers know little to nothing about fascia connective tissue, so they blame your joint for failing. Yet, it's the fascia being pulled too tight, pulling your joint out of place, causing compression in your spine, your hip, your neck, because we're not taught to accurately view our bodies. We have limited knowledge of fascia and connective tissue and how everything's related. You know, the ankle bone is connected to the knee bone, and knee bone's connected to the hip bone, all that childhood phrase, because we're not taught that everything's connected. We're still following the mechanistic 400-year-old Cartesian model where everything is separate. Medical professionals teach you that if you have a knee problem, it's coming from your knee. In my experience of 40 years as a body worker and a yoga therapist, it's almost never coming from your knee or your hip. It's coming from someplace else. But we're not taught that, and we want to put a label on it. Oh, you have arthritis now. It's just poor luck, or it's Tuesday, and that's what happens. The fifth common victim terminology is called genetic. One of the most common overused victim labels is the label genetic. Now, there are some things in our life that are genetic, but they're rare. You know, there's thousands of different diseases, but there's only a handful that have proven to be genetic related. For instance, somebody who's been diagnosed with sickle cell anemia, they show the markers in their blood, and then maybe one or two of their children have the same markers and develop the disease. It's genetically related. Yet, most cases, when a medical professional tells you it's genetic, it's just not true. It means they don't know, so they put the genetic victim label on it. For example, you might hear the fact that there's a breast cancer gene that causes breast cancer. The problem with that analogy is that 95% of women with breast cancer don't have the gene. So how can it be causing breast cancer? So we use the medicalized gene model so much and overuse it where occasionally something is genetic. Most often it's not, but we still keep teaching people that their problems are genetic. That's a crazy way to do life. That's more the victim shaming medicalization model. The next common victim model is called hereditary. The hereditary model is very similar to the genetic model, but a little different. For example, I'll hear over and over again how someone has bunions because it runs in their family. Hogwash, that's not true. It's something you self-create by the shoes you're wearing or the exercise you're doing. You might hear somebody says, well, I have back problems because it runs in my family. Everybody in my family has back problems. There's no familiar relationship there. That's a made-up story. You're all doing the wrong things or teaching each other the wrong things. So a lot of the hereditary models, not all, but most of them are wrong because it's not based on your genes or your hereditary patterns. More often it's created by the family systems you created. For example, you're a family of runners. You all have knee problems because you're all running. That's family related. You're all creating that yourself by the choices you're making. So this notion that hereditary issues cause most of our issues is not true at all. It's things we're creating ourselves, and yes, we're learning different patterns in our family, and we're adopting those patterns, but we're self-creating those patterns ourselves. And you might be the healthiest one in your family, but your family might be junk food eaters and don't exercise. So it doesn't really have to do with your family. It's about how many choices you make for yourself, the clothing styles you make, the shoes you wear, the exercise choices. So the hereditary issue is mostly debunked because most of our issues are not hereditary linked. The next term is called active lifestyle. So we're taught to believe that our active lifestyle is what wears our body parts down, and that it's almost like a badge of honor. Look at, I've been to war and I've basically worn my body down. It's just not true. In most cases, people don't know how to take care of themselves. For example, I played tennis and racquetball and hiked and backpacked and swam and all the active things, and I was broken. After a 5 or 6 day backpacking trip, I couldn't walk. I played tennis and my shoulder hurt. But I also learned how to take care of myself after such activities. So most people, they don't do the right things to take care of themselves. So they lead this pounding warrior mentality where they beat their bodies up. And it's called the active lifestyle mentality, where it wears your body down. Not that it's not okay to go out and be out in the world, hiking, backpacking, cycling, swimming. But most people don't do the work to recover. For example, if you eat food but you forget to brush your teeth are going to rot out. So people lead an active lifestyle, but they don't do the recovery work, the massages, the body work, the yoga, the stretching. So their bodies wear down. And then they blame their back issues, their hip issues, their knee issues on their active lifestyle. No, the real issue is you've neglected your body. You've worn your body down. And most people exercise incorrectly. The current gym fitness-based mentality will wear your body down. It hardens your fascia. It dries you out. You shorten, you shrink, and you harden because the classic Western fitness mentality of sports and fitness will wear you down. And it dries out your tissues, and it shrinks you, and it causes all kinds of joint destabilization. And most people who live that lifestyle don't do the recovery work, which is the massages, the fascia body work, the stretching, the yoga, all the things that would help recover from that. So they're worn down. And so they blame it on wear and tear. It's wear and tear. It's not true. It's neglect by your own choice. So the whole notion of wear and tear is a false narrative because it's really, you're neglecting your body and you're blaming it on, once again, aging or your lifestyle choices. The next victim terminology is called bone on bone. You might have been given the dreaded diagnosis, oh, you have bone on bone now. It's time to replace your knee joint or your hip or in a surgery in your back. It's just a lie because it's not created by randomness. It's created by your own choosing. For example, if your knee has bone on it, it's because the fascia that surrounds the knee is too tight, compressing into the joint, wearing down the cartilage, and the cartilage is now worn down, and you do have bone on bone, but it's not random. You created that by neglecting your fascia. Once again, all the bones in the body, this is a spinal vertebrae, but it could be the knee as well, are surrounded by fascia tissue. And it needs to stay lengthened, long, and soft and supple. When you harden it or neglect it, it dries out. It causes the bones to fuse together. And you wear down the cartilage space between there. Now you have bone on bone. It's because of your choices. We should start teaching yoga in school at 4 years old and go all the way through college and high school and grade school so we don't end up with bone on bone. We should teach athletes, either professional, college, high school, or weekend warriors, how to stretch more. So you end up with bone on bone because we're doing the wrong things. We're not taking care of the fascia in the body, which is pulling the bones together. It's not random. It's the choices you're making. You're choosing to do the wrong kinds of exercise and neglecting the self-care that would take to create space in the joints that protect the joints. You are choosing that. It's not a random thing at all. When you pay attention to your fascia and you spend time with it, you have to keep it long, supple, and warm, like in yoga or stretching classes or something like that. You don't end up with bone on bone because the joints have created space between them. You create bone on bone with the wrong kinds of exercise, which is gym workouts and fitness workouts and sports. And then you're now a victim of your biology because now the bones are wearing down because they're compressing together. You're choosing that because you've neglected your fascia. The next term is called breakdown. You know, your car breaks down. It blows a gasket or a hose or a tire. It happens because the parts wear out. But our parts are designed to last a lot longer without breaking down. Breaking down means you've done the wrong things in your life and you haven't done the maintenance work. It's like your teeth fall apart because you didn't do the maintenance work, the teeth cleaning, the brushing. So breakdown is another victim terminology, and it wants to blame your biology and what's happening to you in almost every case. It's not age-related or hereditary or genetic or biology. It's or even the calendar days you have. It's the choices you're making or not making. Your body is falling apart because of the choices you are making. You're not doing the self-care that would basically change that. And so we need to stop blaming our body and our biology for failing us. So anytime you hear a medical professional say, well, you're just breaking down, it means you've been doing the wrong things for an awful long time, and now you're rooted in those wrong things, and now you're blaming biology. So your body is not supposed to break down. Basically, that means you're blaming something else for the choices you're making. The next victim words are injury bug. I hear this all the time, especially among athletes, either professional or college or high school or soccer players who are 12 years old. Oh, somebody has the injury bug. 2 years ago they had an ankle sprain, then last year they had a knee problem, then this year they have a hip problem, now it turned into a back problem and a groin problem and a hamstring problem. We blame it on, it's the injury bug. It's like the water they're drinking, or somebody put something in their Gatorade. Not true at all. The fact is, most injuries, whether they be sports related or car accident or other types of trauma, never get corrected properly. So they linger. So you might have fallen off the jungle gym when you're 8 years old and broken your foot, and then 25 years later, you have to have a hip replacement because the injury never got created. It created a spiral in your leg. So most injuries lead to something else, and it starts to cascade. It's a cascading effect because most people, athletes included, don't age well. Athletes are some of the worst aging people. They're dehydrated and dried out and hard and rigid and tight with all kinds of surgeries and medications because all those injuries start to add up because they're related to each other. Remember, once again, most people in the physical therapy world, in the medical world, in the sports fitness world are practicing mechanism, which states if your knee hurts, it must be coming from your knee, which is completely wrong. This is a 400-year-old mistake. And so when they start having knee and hamstring issues, they go, let's start to build strength around our knee, which is the wrong thing to be doing. And they don't realize their ankle was sprained 20 years earlier, and now they have a knee issue. So the fact that somebody has an injury bug is part of the mythology and the victim labeling again. And almost all injuries are related to something that happened before, but we're not taught to think that way. So when you start hearing the injury bug analogy from medical doctors or media people, don't believe it because it's related to something else that previously happened that never got properly corrected, and now you start having a cascade of bad things happening. The next label to address is called father time. The next term, father time, it has relevance in our life. I'm not saying that aging doesn't affect us. It does. I think aging has an effect on us. But it's not as great as you might believe. And most people are doing most of the wrong things. Once again, it goes back to the calendar again. They go, oh, father time caught up with you because the aging and father time, no one defeats father time. Father time always wins. That's because, for example, with an athlete, they start to have multiple injuries that never get properly taken care of. They don't pay attention to their fascia, so they dry out, harden, and stiffen, and they start having a cascade of injuries because they don't properly take care of them because the physical therapy, sports therapy industry doesn't teach you how to care for yourself properly, which to me would be more stretching, more fascia body work, more massages, more lengthening. They do too much strength training, so you start having hard, dried out tissues that start to wear you down. The more muscle you develop, the slower you become because it starts to harden and dry out the fascia which surrounds the muscle. So you become a dried out piece of beef jerky over time. So that's what happens with father time is people are drying out because they're not properly taking care of their fascia and their other body parts correctly because we live in a backwards medical model. that teaches you to be a victim of your own anatomy. So Father Time doesn't really exist. I've seen athletes play sports for a really long time if they properly take care of themselves, and most don't. And the common person doesn't properly take care of themselves either, so they start to see them slowing down, and they start to limp and drag their hip and leg because they're not properly taking care of themselves. Most people would rather spend the money on a cruise or to remodel their bathroom than the proper self-care like massages, yoga classes, or body work. And that's important to them, so their bodies wear down. And that's the priorities they're making. So Father Time doesn't really exist. It's the choices that we're making during those time periods. It's a question I asked many, many years ago. I watched people who looked healthy and vibrant and alive in their bodies, and it was many older yoga teachers, especially women. I'm thinking, wow, this person looks completely flexible and alive and vibrant, and they're 80, 90 years old. I go, I want to know what they're doing. That's what I want to follow, because when I practice fitness and sports and weight training, I was broken and I was defeated, and I had back problems for 30 years of sciatica, and that was destroying me. So when I started the yoga practice and saw what yoga people were doing, going, wow, this is the kind of body I want. I don't want to believe in this Father Time thing, because I see people of advanced age who are doing really well, so I followed their model. The next term is called random. I see this all the time with sports trainers and media personalities. They watch a track athlete running down the field, and all of a sudden they pull up because they tore their hamstring. Oh, that's just random. Well, it's not random. Their leg's been imbalanced and misaligned for a long time, and they've ignored it or put muscle on top of it. I see a soccer player running down the field, and all of a sudden, barely moving, torques his knee and tears a ligament. It doesn't happen randomly. It means the whole leg's been imbalanced and misaligned for a long time. I see people walking, and all of a sudden their hip goes out, their back goes out. It's not random. It means they've ignored everything for a long time, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back. So random doesn't happen. Random means you've ignored your body and played through things and put muscle on top of imbalances, and you have a cascade of injuries that have previously happened, and now you suffer the consequences. For example, if you've got a hamstring injury, it's most likely caused by a rotated shin and ankle injury that happened years or decades before, causing extra strain above the knee. It's not random. It's things happen because we've ignored all the processes going on and played through something or fought through it or shaken it off, but it never got properly corrected. Now you're suffering the consequences. So random rarely exists. The next term is called unfortunate. So using the victim terminology is common in our culture. You'll hear sometimes somebody says, well, it was unfortunate that I got caught for speeding. Well, that's not unfortunate. That's a bad choice. So it happens a lot with media personalities, and it happens with sports and medical officials when they say, oh, it was unfortunate that his back went out. Well, basically, it didn't happen randomly, and it's not unfortunate. It was a whole series of issues that the person's ignored. And basically, they've ignored the imbalances, and now it comes back to bite them. So the whole terminology, unfortunate, it's a way to placing blame again, where it's a self-creation of what somebody's done or not done or ignored, and now you're paying the price for that. Idiopathic is a common term as well in the victim languaging department. So it's common in the medical profession to hear the term idiopathic. Idiopathic is a medical term for, I don't know. Let's just give it a medical term. You might hear somebody say you've got idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, or idiopathic asthma, or idiopathic back pain. It means the doctor, the medical professional, doesn't know, but they give it a term. You know why they give it a term? Because it works for insurance billing. If you walked into a doctor's office and they said, I don't know what's wrong with you, go someplace else, they can't charge you any money. But if they give you a label, I don't know label, idiopathic, then they can charge you, because now it's a medical term. It means, I don't know, but now we can charge you. So you'll hear a lot in the medical world, idiopathic. Basically, I don't know, but it's the victim term, meaning I have no idea what's going on. But that's what they do. It's part of the victim terminology in our culture. Just get used to it is also commonly used. So we often hear, just get used to it. It's a subtle defeat. It's a subtle implication that basically we can't cure you, we can't make you better. Just learn to live with it. And in some cases that might be true, but in many other cases there are solutions. And you might have to search outside the box for those solutions. So I'm not a big fan of the just get used to it approach, because it really means you haven't found the solution yet. And you shouldn't have to get used to it. There are solutions, perhaps. You just haven't found them yet or found the right person to address them. I see people all the time with back problems who went to 1, 2, 3 medical doctors, physical therapists, all kinds of specialists, and they can't get out of back pain. And I give them a whole new model to look at, and they go, wow, how come you know that and no one else knows that? Because I said, because I'm not going to teach you to get used to it. I'm going to teach you how, let's keep looking for an answer. And if the answer you're given isn't satisfactory, then go find somebody else who has a different answer, different approach. So I don't believe in this victim model of just get used to it. And the last victim terminology is there is no cure. So I've heard a lot of people who are told there is no cure. And I don't claim to know everything about everything in life or the anatomy of the body, but I've seen a lot of people cured of many things, including myself. When I was told there's no cure, get used to it. So that's a classic victim terminology. It usually means the professional doesn't know the answer, so they're basically telling you, lower your expectations, and I don't believe that. And so there's no cure. Don't follow that. Keep looking for a solution, finding other people with different ideas and different possibilities, and think outside the box, because there is no cure is not a great empowerment model. It means I just haven't found the solution yet. So we live in a victim model based on the language we use, and if you start to change your language, you'll have a different outcome. For example, you might begin to say, I wonder how I'm going to cure this. Or I wonder how I'm going to fix this. I wonder how I'm going to find a new solution. I wonder where help's going to come from. You start to look at things differently and out of an old model. I mean, I would crawl into emergency rooms looking for pain pills for my back problems because the doctors told me there's nothing they can do. And so I look for new models, and I'm pain-free today because I stepped outside the box and I asked the question, I wonder how to change this. I wonder where help is coming from. So as long as you stay a victim of your anatomy, that's not going to happen. You're going to be basically defeated, and you're going to succumb to this victim mentality that pervades the medical white coat industry. So I invite you to look at the language you use for your own anatomy. And when you start having an issue, a problem, maybe start looking outside the box or who your professionals are, and start to ask different questions. So thank you for joining me today for this inclusive video on the language of victim anatomy. If you'd like to learn more about me, you can visit my website, johnburris.com. You can subscribe to this channel here for more leading edge videos to come. I also have a great book you can buy it on Amazon. It's called Return to Nature, The 5 Pillars of Healing, where you'll find all kinds of great healing information. So remember, you don't have to be a victim of your anatomy, but you have to look at it and change how you use language and words. So thank you for joining me today.